first session of July, and July also is going to be a packed month. And we hope you're going to join us for all the sessions, each one of them at 6 o'clock on the weekends. Maja House, as you know, is a literary and cultural center in Amritsar, and it is a physical space. And in happier days, we would have loved to have you here with us. Listen to Anusha and Sandeep sit with us and tell us about their book, talk to us about it over a steaming cup of chai or coffee, and have the world famous samosas that come from our market. That would have been in happier times. But since, we are all in different stages of lockdown and corona troubles, um, sadly enough, it has to be an online session. But all of you are extremely welcome to Maja House. I'm delighted to welcome both of you here today. Anusha, Sandeep, thank you for joining us, and thank you for bringing your book to us on this platform. Here it is, The War That Made Raw. And I have to say, it's an extremely interesting account of Raw and the person the founder and the chief who actually put it on the map of world espionage, as it were. And it's perhaps the first time that such a comprehensive, all-source, multi-focus sort of book has been written on this subject. And as I said before, it's eminently readable for a lay reader like me who had no idea, who did not really know very much either about Raw, or then about all these, the background machinations that went into trying to win the war, not just on the battlefield, but also on the stuff that the covert stuff that was going on behind the war. And that the integral role that RAW played in the liberation of Bangladesh, especially. So some of this and more is what we are going to hear about this evening, and I know that we are all looking forward to it. We have Kaveri Bamsai, who's supposed to join us, and I hope she will shortly. She's having some trouble. She's supposed to do the conversation with Anusha and Sandeep. But in the meantime, let me tell you a little more about them. So Anusha Nandakumar is an independent filmmaker, and her documentary film, The Boxing Ladies, won the National Film Award in 2010. She and Sandeep Saket are creators and writers of a thriller series for Amazon Prime, which will be made by Rohit Shetty. How fantastic is that? It's going to be great fun, I'm sure. Sandeep Saket has worked in the film and TV industry for more than 10 years. He has written the Hindi feature film Saat Uchakke and the series Dilli Wood. And he's also working on various other series for OTT platforms. Kaveri, who I hope will join us, is a senior independent journalist, and she was the former editor. She was the editor of India Today. She's the co-founder of Three Stories and presenter of Tiffin Talks, which are conversations devoted to books and films and popular culture. She's also written 3 books, and her forthcoming book is called The Three Khans and the Emergence of New India. Anyway, since I don't know whether she's here. Vindaji, is she here with us now?
Not yet.
Not yet. So I think we just go ahead with you at least telling us about your book and why you wrote it, what brought it on, how did you get interested in the subject, and then a little bit about what is in the book. Over to you now.
Thank you, Preeti. Thank you for inviting us. We're very excited to be on Maja House.
Yeah, really thank you for having us here.
So to begin with, yes, we are actually, we've studied film at SRFTI, that is Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute, which is in Kolkata. And I think somewhere the genesis of the book happened there because, we were in Kolkata and we've heard so many stories about the Bangladesh war and the refugees. And we had friends who came from, different families, had family in Bangladesh. So the genesis of the idea was somewhere there. And Sandeep he studied history. And I guess like those two things together was where the whole research bit started, because we started reading up more about the war. We had no intention of writing anything. It was just like out of curiosity. And war stories are extremely fascinating. So the more we read about it, we started tracing back the roots of it, and then we realized that, okay, so the war happened in 71, and RAW was formed in 68. So it was like, oh, these two are connected. So that's when we started kind of going down the rabbit hole and came up with and we discovered so many stories. In popular culture, we realized that there's hardly been any stories about the war.
About the war, actually, in popular Indian culture, people don't talk about war. In Western culture, people talk about the wars, their spy network and everything. People talk about it, and like there are a lot of books, there are a lot of fiction and non-fiction about them. But somehow Indians have never written much about this. Especially the 71 war was a war, which is not a war where we fought it, for somebody else. And such a glorious moment for India, but nobody writes about it. Nobody writes, hardly there have been books about the military aspect of it, but there has never been a book about which connects the spy aspect and plus the military aspect of it. So we thought, why don't we connect, those two dots and make a wholesome picture of it.
And we have no history or any family who were in the army or related to, spycraft. So we approached it as two people interested in the history of the country. And I guess that's the approach that also spilled over in the book. We wanted it to be, interesting enough, but also simple enough for everybody to connect with it. So, but just to go a little bit back, so we had all this information and we didn't know what to do with it, because now we have all the information, and we've never studied to be authors, we are filmmakers, writers. But we were working very closely, we still work very closely with Mr. Hussain Zaidi. And, we were telling him the stories, almost in an anecdotal way about, do you know about this thing that happened in the war? Do you know about this? So he said that, this is great. You guys have done so much work. Don't let it go to waste. Write a book. And it was like a scary thought to be writing a non-fiction book about something that you don't have any expertise on. But he kind of, guided, coaxed, cajoled, scolded, and then made us write this book. And it was a fun process, because the more you wrote, the more you start going into the history of the country.
And also during the course of our research for the book, we read a lot of books, and they were primarily history depicting as it was, and that was, as you said, Kate, is quite readable, that book. So that was our effort also, to present the history in a manner which is readable, accessible, and also maybe connected to, people and easy read, So that is why we gave it a nice structure of, starting a chapter with a nice thing and then ending it on a kind of cliffhanger. So we go to the next chapter. It is again, everything is fact here, but the only...
And because you're filmmakers and visual people, I guess that, plays into trying to make it, one can actually see what's going on.
I think our screenplay writing training, that kicked in when we started writing, because I guess that's the way that we are most comfortable while telling stories. Yeah. And we have nieces and nephews and lots of young people around us, like the millennials. So we wanted to make sure that this book is understood by everybody, that it has they have no patience, right? Including us nowadays. So it has to just grab people, but also needs to be authentic enough, because it is going to be viewed as something on the history of our country. So it was a big responsibility that way, and it took some time.
So like you said, that it's also going to be viewed as part of the country's history, and you said earlier that there are hardly any books which are on all of these major wars, especially as military exercises, but not a little bit beyond that. They're not about, they're not taking it beyond that. So military historians, for example, would have read this book and you would have got reviews. What kind of response was that?
Military historians, we have not gotten a response from. One, Mr.
No, actually, we've gotten personal messages from them. So I think that was what we were most scared of. We were like, okay, we've written this. We had interviewed a few people who are part of RAW, who are part of the military. But like once the book comes out, that was the criticism that we were terrified of. But I think we've got some pretty good reviews. Like
from Mr. Bappala Balachandran, who actually helped us a lot during the book and all. And he
Acha.
reviewed, and he, like, he wrote nice things about book. Like a teacher talks about their students, and he very nicely scolded us also for some one or two information that we have.
Yeah, scolded us very publicly in the wire, but
Okay.
he was
Ah.
so yeah. So it's been a lot of people have reached out and said that this is what happened, and I can imagine Mr. Kao and Mr. Shankaran Nair talking the way that they are talking. So it felt quite like it was a validation to get this kind of criticism from the people around us. So yeah, and we just want to put out a disclaimer right away. We don't do a lot of public speaking, and sometimes we get a little hassled and we forget names, and we get trolled a lot for this online. So it's just that it takes us 5 seconds for the name to arrive, but we know the names. So just bear with
there
us.
are too many names in this book. There are too many names.
Too many names, too many
That's-
dates. So
yeah. No, I'm sure that's fine. But tell us also a little bit about the earlier wars that also I saw mentioned here, with China and with Pakistan, even before Bangladesh, and before probably India had any great espionage network set up. Before that, what were things like earlier, before this happened?
We'll just take you a little through the book. So the hero of this book, or the it revolves around Mr. Kao, who is the founder of RAW, and he kind of came into prominence when he investigated this the crash of Kashmiri Princess, which was an aircraft. This happened in 1955, where Kashmiri Princess aircraft took off from Hong Kong, and it was going to go to Indonesia for the Badung conference. And midair, it crashed into Indonesian waters. And that became, it wouldn't have been news, but it became news because the prime minister, the Chinese premier, Zhu Enlai, was supposed to be on that flight, and he cancelled last minute. So when that happened, China turned to India for support. Jawaharlal Nehru went to the IB, and the IB suggested, okay, Mr. Kao will handle this. And so it became like a very complicated investigation that he had to do, because the flight was US made flight. The crew was Indian. Like, it took off from Hong Kong, which was a British colony, and it landed in Indonesian waters. So all of these countries became involved in that investigation, and he did it so successfully that he was rewarded. So that was his, like, that first moment of claim to fame. And from there he rose to prominence. He became Mr. Nehru's, personal security advisor. And then the wars happened.
So in 1962, when China actually took India by surprise, and we lost a lot of land, that time IB was the agency responsible for all the information, all the intelligence information gathering coming to India. And post that 1965 war happened with Pakistan. And both these wars, 62 war India lost, but 65 war also with Pakistan, India won by a small margin. In both those cases, after the war, in 1967 or something, inquiry was commissioned for the failures of Indian, intelligence during those wars. And then realized that during that time, India was dependent on foreign intelligence services for the internal intelligence in India. And that led to the failure and intelligence failure in both the wars. And that was the report which Mr. Kao submitted to Ms. Indira Gandhi, or Mrs. Indira Gandhi, who was the Prime Minister then. And that called for a agency which is totally dedicated to the foreign intelligence, gathering intelligence from the neighboring country, not only neighboring countries, but international, landscape, and using it for Indian setup or Indian, policies. That is what the genesis of RAW.
So Mrs. Gandhi took that report, and it was in the first 2 years of her prime minister like she had just become the prime minister, and she was the one who took that bold decision of saying, okay, we need to learn from the failures of IB. So this now intelligence will be bifurcated into internal intelligence and external intelligence. And external intelligence would be called RAW, and it would be headed by Mr. Kao. And that's how the RAW came into being. But when they were formed, they didn't know that just 2 years down the line, they're going to be participating and winning in this big war for India. So that's been the genesis of the foundation of RAW.
Well, we have Deepati with us now. And
Hi.
Thanks,
I'm
Deepti.
hi, Anusha.
Yeah,
Hello.
hi. Sorry, we
We're
had to
back.
pull you in
No
suddenly.
worries.
But I just want to say that we have Deepti here. She's chief editor at Westland Books, and she's going to also join the conversation now with us. And
Okay.
Kaveri has obviously been held up. She was most excited about being here today, but obviously there's been some problem.
Yeah.
So, Deepti, I'm going to let you hold the conversation now, and then
Okay.
when you are ready to leave, because I believe you have something else,
I do.
I'll take over again then at that point.
Sure, sure.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I missed the first bit, so I don't want to like go over
No,
anything.
we've just been going over the little bit of the history of the book and the wars and how this book came to be. I think
So we've
in a nutshell.
spoken about how the need for an external intelligence agency and how RAW came into being. So that's what we spoke about.
Okay, cool. And have you talked about like how easy or difficult it was to do research for the book? Because
Yes, we spoke
one of the things that people have really enjoyed, of course, of the book about the book is that the research is really good, but also how absorbing it is. It's not like it's not like here is like this huge thesis on this subject. So I really want to talk about that a little bit as well, which we didn't get to the last time, because this is your first book, right? So I mean, I think it's really interesting that you were able to get that balance. So yeah, so first talk about how easy or difficult it was to get the research, and also how writing it. Yeah.
So getting the research part of it, like just all the information was not there.
Anusha, please, can you be a little louder?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So getting the research part of it, all the information was not that difficult, because there's been lots and lots of things written about the war and the RAW, and a little bit about the cowboys as well. Like the cowboys are all the men that Mr. Kao got together to form RAW, so they were officially called cowboys. That was not the problem. I think we really struggled to find a structure and to find like a style for this book.
That is where actual fight started, because we had all the information, all the research, but how to structure it in a manner which does not sound like a history lesson, which doesn't sound like a history book, using facts and events and everything. So that is where we did a lot of effort, actually structuring the book. And primarily the book is about how espionage helped win a war. So that was our one primary goal, how espionage agency set up by Mr. Kao helped Mr. Mr. Manik Shah win the war, actually, So that was the primary thing. Sorry, General Manik Shah. Sorry, yeah.
No, so we got all the information, and yeah, like the fight was Mr. Hussain Zaidi first. Yeah. We said that we have all this information, let us just write a fiction book, because people are going to be like, who are these people? Why are they writing a book about RAW? And then we were like, if we write it, who's going to be wanting to read this book? So he was like, don't be silly. Like, you have all this information. Don't make it into a fiction book, because it needs to be told as it is. So it took us like a really long time to absorb it, and then say that, okay, fine, let's write it the way we know. That is like, let's make it visual. Let's take those things that excited us when we read the information and make it flow like a fictional story. But it's all true. It's all true.
Yeah. So no, it's amazing how, I mean, really this whole thing of truth being stranger than fiction, and how dramatic things were. I mean, of course, with the background of war, but everything, like even when you just begin with the whole how Mr. Kao became sort of the favorite in that agency. What was it? Was it the princess? Was that what it was called? The
Kashmiri
Kashmiri
princess.
the Kashmiri princess. Even that, like everything is just like, it's just astonishing, the stories that you have. Is Kaveri online, Preeti? I can just
Yeah,
see
it looks like she's
Yeah.
joined us now.
Yeah, she's
Okay.
joined, and I've requested her to unmute herself. And please turn on your camera, Kaveri.
I've done both.
But your visuals are not available. Please do it once again. Try it once again.
Okay, let me just log on once again. Yeah.
Oh, all right. All right.
So let's continue listening. This was good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I don't know how many people have already read the book amongst your viewers, but do you want to talk a little bit about that, that Kashmiri princess?
We just spoke
We
about
just
it.
spoke
about it.
We spoke
Okay.
about Kashmiri princess and how he rose to prominence with that probe.
Right.
Then we spoke about because then he seemed the man fit for the job, and Mrs. Indira Gandhi trusted him to lead RAW.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
we've been at the part of RAW, and then I guess so we, till maybe Kaveri joins us, we can just say that. So when RAW was formed, then what happened was he needed to recruit people. So a lot of people were recruited from the IB, and it was quite a fight because internally there was a lot of politics. People didn't want RAW to be formed, and it was Mr. Huxer who kind of did the batwara, like this is yours, theirs, and guys, we are all in this together. It was like that kind of a negotiation that happened, and that's the group, the core group of Shankaran Nair, MBK Nair, Hassan Walia, like all of these people, PN Banerjee, they became the cowboys. Hi, Kaveri.
Kaveri is here.
Okay.
See me now?
Hi, Kaveri. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Preeti. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. I know that you were held up somewhere, so Deepti was also trying to hold the conversation together with the two writers. And now we are going to hand everything over to you and your capable hands.
And do I have to take questions from the audience? Will you tell me when to do that?
Yeah, we'll do that at the last 10 minutes or so.
Okay, great. Wonderful. So I'll do about till about 8:05, or when do you want me to stop?
No, the session is till about 7, so till 10 to 7 or so.
Till 10 to 7, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking of 8 to 5. Till 10 to 7. 10 past 7, right?
10 to 7.
Okay, great. All right. Shall we begin?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So hello and welcome to Anushka Nankumar and Sandeep Saket. The book is just wonderful. I just spent the whole morning reading it, and I mean, it's still just playing out in my mind like a movie. And I think it's been written like a movie. It's so cinematic. You can almost see it unfolding like a web series. And I actually can't wait to watch it. And I can't wait to watch particular characters, like Mrs. Shamim or that Laila Hussain. I mean, you've got such wonderful characters in there, and that attention to detail, it really shows. So I want to congratulate both of you. I don't know how you sort of managed to wrap up this wonderful history and write it so well. A lot of the things are known, but a lot is also not known, which is what amazes me, despite the amount of work that's been done on the cowboys and on RNAW itself. So my congratulations again. And I have to ask both of you, how were you sort of drawn to this story, this sort of spy master's story? What is it in your DNA that sort of attracts this kind of storytelling?
Yeah. So first, we are, I'm a history student. We both are history buffs, and we did a film schooling from Calcutta, Satyajit Film and TV Institute.
Okay.
There are a lot of friends who were from Bangladesh, originally from Bangladesh. They migrated during the war and after the war.
Right.
And we had a lot of interaction with them. And also, we knew about 1971 war, but there's no definitive as such, book on the spy aspect of it. And espionage as a subject, it's very fascinating for both of us. And generally, I think it's a very fascinating subject. And India has won a great war in 1971. So we wanted to bring those two, and then we got to know about that RAW was formed in 1968, end of 1968, and how it actually, within 2 years, they had to actually, a child who has not yet started, started walking, they had to actually run and win a race. So that is what they did, and that is what, fascinated us to tell this story, espionage, how it espionage, help us win the.
I think we were trying to find our own Desi James Bond, and that's how we stumbled upon Mr. Kao.
And Mr. Kao with his three-piece suits and it's quite ridiculous. But no shaken and stirred martini though, unfortunately.
No. Maybe just some Kashmiri kawa.
And I'm a Kashmiri myself, so Mr. Kao really is one of those legendary figures in the Kashmiri community. So it's nice to see him being lionized like this, and you can really recognize a lot of the Kashmiri elements to this. There's P.N. Haksar, there's D.P. Dhar, all of them at that point were part of Mrs. Gandhi's kitchen cabinet, as it was called, and they all feature. But my question really to both of you was those little details that you managed to capture. I find those fascinating. For instance, Kashmir Baby, the spy that almost the first recruits that they have. So how did you go about finding all this out? A tremendous amount of research. So tell me about that.
So we research assistant, we would like to give her a shout out, called Yogini. So she just graduated, and she wanted to kind of write with us. And we told her at that point, the only thing we were doing is researching and writing a book, which we don't know if it'll ever come out, but it's one of our pet projects. So she kind of just said, oh no, let's do this. And when you get that kind of energy, you also just go with the flow. So we did a lot of research, and Kashmir Bedi is kind of an amalgamation of a lot of characters who were recruited at that point. And it was such an old school style of working. Now we call it old school, but spotting the correct people, getting them when they are a little, knowing the best time to approach them, talk to them, getting them to kind of fight for the country. So we read about these stories, we heard about these stories from the people who we interviewed, and then they all became this character of Kashmir Bedi, it's very close to somebody we were told about. So from there, and then we could imagine that world from the stories that we heard. So that's how the character of Kashmir Bedi happened.
I like your storytelling device. It's like a mix of fiction. It's called faction, I suppose. It's a mix of fiction and a fact. It's a very interesting device because it takes you right into the rooms and into the heart of every conversation, heart of every decision. So talk about deciding to use that kind of storytelling technique.
See, we knew certain facts. We knew that Mr. Kao has gone and met Indira Gandhi, but we do not know the details of that thing. That what happened, what transpired, who said what. Then we imagine a conversation, what would have happened between those conversations. We know the result of those meetings, but how those results came out, that is where we put little drama in. So then you give those. Normally in history books, you don't have a personality into the paper.
Right.
So we try to give those personality, Mr. Shankaran Nair, Mr. Banerjee, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, of course, she is much thing, but also Mr. Kao, the personality and how they, different personalities, they speak about the same mission. So that is prime.
So we had I think in our heads and also on paper, some keywords that we had associated with characters.
Right.
So Mr. Kao was suave, stylish, very soft-spoken. Shankaran Nair was this guy who is completely opposite of Mr. Kao, will call a spade a spade. So once we had these keywords for characters, then it became easier to kind of imagine the dialogue that would happen between them. And they were also contemporaries and friends, so there would be that level of respect, but they would say what they have to say in this way. At least this is what we imagined it to be.
Right.
And it made their conversations fun, and it made chapter writing a lot of fun.
Right.
And later on, in Wire, Mr. Bapla Balachandran, who actually worked with Mr. Nair and Mr. Kao, he said, I can totally imagine these two gentlemen sitting
Wow.
there and having a conversation like that.
Yeah.
He said, I can totally see them.
Yeah, so that was
that was
compliment, isn't it?
that was a yeah.
And even Shankar and I and Mr. Kao, of course, are better known. But for instance, the character of Mr. Banerjee, who actually had that link with Bangladesh, with erstwhile Bangladesh. He is one of the real mystery characters. I haven't read so much about him at all. Talk a little about him.
So, Ms. P.N. Banerjee was an ex-military, ex-army officer, and when he was recruited, he was given the East Pakistan desk, which was like actually the Bangladesh desk. And because of him being Bengali, there was an easier connect. Like Mr. Kao felt that there would be a easier connect for him to have with Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So I guess. So they connected on all things cultural and linguistic, and he formed that friendship, and that friendship still continues. I think it's all thanks to Mr. P.N. Banerjee that he formed that link between India and East Pakistan or Bangladesh. And
also during when Operation Searchlight was about to begin, and India had gotten to know, agency had gotten to know, and they wanted Sheikh Mujibur to actually come out from that country because they realized that Pakistani government might kill him. So then P.N. Banerjee actually went and met him.
Yeah, he met him. He tried to convince him to come back, but Sheikh Mujibur Rahman said that I'm not going to run away like a coward. If they have to kill me, they kill me in my house. So he was the one who used his friendship. And it was a real friendship. It lasted till both their deaths. So it was a very strong bond that they had.
In fact, that was one of the most remarkable revelations to me, that the Indians, there were 2 or 3 things. One, that the Indians were very well aware of what is going to happen, right? They knew that there would be a strike against Mujibur Rahman. That for me was a revelation, that they knew and they warned him, but yet Mujib sort of refused. The second thing to me, which was a revelation, was that hijack, which I think is truly spectacular, and I can very well imagine that it must have happened, So talk about that as well. It's for people who haven't read the book and really should just go out there and buy it right now. Talk about that hijack. It's truly phenomenal. I mean, look at that twisted mind that came up with that.
So 2 things are happening parallelly. Post Bangladesh's general election, when Sheikh Mujibur Rahman won the landslide victory in the entire Pakistan assembly, but Pakistan didn't want to give him the reign of the entire country, being an East Pakistani and inferior and everything. During that time, also India got to know through their informant network, RAW got to know that Pakistan was flying a lot of man and material from Lahore to Dhaka, which is a short flight, from above Indian airspace. And interestingly, at the same time, border security force in Kashmir caught one guy called
Hashim Qureshi.
And Hashim Qureshi, through interrogation, they came to know Hashim Qureshi actually came to India. That that he came to India to hijack a plane which would have been flown by Indira Gandhi's son Rajiv Gandhi, and he would have demanded something out of that.
And Hashim Qureshi was a teenager. He was
16.
16 years old.
Yeah. So
like the BSF was like, what is this courage and audacity that you come over to our country and you want to hijack a flight that have Rajiv Gandhi flying it?
Right.
So they didn't know what to do, and while they were a little foxed, I think that was the opportunity that RAW needed. And they said, okay, so Mr. Kao said, okay, fine, let's put a plan into action. So they kind of took that teenager, brainwashed him, and made him hijack an Indian flight.
And then what transpired post that, actually, we will not tell you the entire detail of the story. What transpired post that actually resulted in, normally in peacetime, one country randomly just cannot say, Pakistan, I don't like you, stop flying above us, stop using our airspace. But this arrest of this random hijacking youth, RAW devised a huge, very complicated, complex plan, which ended in actually India banning Pakistan's overflight, because then Pakistan would have to fly circumnavigate India all through, down south
From
and come
Sri
to
Lanka, which is what they had to
from
do.
Sri Lanka. Yeah, it would have taken really one day to actually arrive.
And this hijacking was one of the first hijackings. So the hijackers were like felicitated by the Pakistani government. The people who were hijacked were sent back to India
on humanitarian
grounds.
Yeah.
So once they were sent back, there was no basis for that hijacking. So it became like this really convoluted plan that worked.
Very complex.
Amazing. That's what I said. Only a very, very twisted mind can come up with something like that. And you have Mrs. Gandhi and Ramnath Kao sort of exchanging notes after this, and Mr. Kao doesn't really reveal much, and Mrs. Gandhi is supposed to understand what happened,
That was the primary, bedrock of their relationship and their conversation. Nothing would ever be written. Everything would be spoken. I say, you receive it, and you understand, and you give me instruction.
Yeah.
No record.
And now that we have this popular term, need to know basis.
So did you also speak to a lot of current people who are with R&AW, or did you rely mostly on published sources?
No, published,
It was a mix of both. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, like, we spoke to a lot of ex-RAW officers, because even say Mr. Vapala Balachandran, he had joined after the war, so he didn't know the details of what happened there. So it was like taking that information and asking them certain questions about certain missions, and then filling in the blanks that we needed and we didn't have in public domain. So
also, nobody from during the war actually is active right now. Most of them were old and passed away. Most of them. We actually talked to some military people also. Mr. General Sagat Singh's son we spoke to, and he told us about all the military details too.
And also, I think all the Pakistani politicians of that time, I think you bring that out really well. The dynamics between Yahya Khan, Ayub Khan, Yahya Khan himself as a character, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. I mean, these are real characters. And Tika Khan, of course, the butcher of Bangladesh, really. So I think weaving all those strands is really, must have been quite a task. So what was going on in your minds? How were you mapping this whole thing? How did you do it? And who did the heavy lifting? Who did the thinking? Who did the writing? Or did you both do everything?
It's a mix of both, because structuring of the chapters was a task actually. How to structure them and how to hold back certain information from this chapter and bring it in the other chapter where it is more relevant. So we have even history of Bangladesh is not only told in one chapter but two different chapters. So
I think you will understand this, because you're from the entertainment world. Like, we looked at it like a screenplay.
Right.
So it was like, what is our cold open? What is our cliffhanger? How do we do this? And if you had to look at it like a series, this is how we would have structured it. We would have had a hero introduction. We know what the story, we know what the end is, thankfully. So we found our beginning, we found our end. And then we said that this is not only about Mr. Kao, but it's about all those men around him, the cowboys who helped with this war. Yeah. So it became like, okay, from Mr. Kao, we go into different strands and we continue those strands and get them in, weave them in, and along with giving context for that history. So I think that was the toughest part, where we give context, but also make that context interesting. Right. So that was how we kind of structured it.
I want to take a moment to record my appreciation for Mrs. Shamim and Laila Hussain. Talk about loving Mrs. Shamim. I mean, she must have been shamed, named, shamed. She must have been ostracized after Bangladesh became independent. Whatever happened to her?
Actually, so we got a lot of information about her also through this like a lot of interviews in from like West Pakistan books and newspapers, who spoke about recording studios and how important she was at that point of time. And I think, yeah, she was shamed a lot, like,
Yeah.
because it was like West Pakistan was reeling after this after
Yeah.
the defeat, and it was like a really tough time for them. And even even contemporary Pakistani fiction authors still refer to that period and the relationships that broke, like how Bengali women in West Pakistan were ostracized also.
Yeah.
Like, so it was, I'm sure, honestly, we don't know too much about what happened, but we, like, from what we read was that, how she was the one who kind of mesmerized everybody, and then she just disappeared. She disappeared like the rest of them, like,
Yeah.
like when Yahya Khan disappeared, like, who is Shamim, like, so it was
Black
anybody.
Pearl sounds
Black
so exotic.
Very
Yeah.
exotic, yeah.
And so, no, everybody who didn't contribute, like, to the who contributed to the defeat of the war, they all kind of disappeared after the war.
I really wonder what happened to them. I think they deserve a separate story themselves. Leila
Yeah.
Hussain walking into the airport lounge and catching hold of Zulfikar, and sort of there is a sense that they had this relationship before. And
Yeah.
but for Ramnath Kao to remember that this woman had a relationship with him, I mean, talk about that mind.
So it's sorry.
No, please.
So he was told about it through Mr. Shashanka Banerjee. So
Right.
he told him about it, but I think the beauty of Mr. Kao's mind was that he could piece things together. It was like, okay, it was like a puzzle solving thing. And at that point, this is after the war. Like, they had won the war, but the main thing that they needed was they needed to get Sheikh Mujibur Rahman back. They needed him back, and the only thing that they could give in return were all the prisoners of war.
Yeah.
And Miss Leila Hussein's husband was one of the prisoners of war in India. And so they used Leila Hussein's connection with Mr. Bhutto, and she kind of did that, like, arzi, initial negotiation.
Yeah.
And I also think it was quite commendable that this is what they chose. They said that, we won the war for Bangladesh, and they need to have their leader back. So it's not about us tom-tomming our victory. It's about, like, getting the rightful heir back, and we'll do whatever it takes. So
Also, Mrs. Indira Gandhi was, by Pakistan, they were continuously accusing Mrs. Gandhi of being imperialistic. They said it's, Indira Gandhi's role is to, final goal is to win East Pakistan and rule over it. And that is where the play came along, where she negotiated the entire deal, got Mujibur Rahman back, sent the prisoners of war, and did not pursue on that imperialistic goal. She did not want to look like that.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the remarkable things about it. And I think that is what the Americans didn't understand, which India understood, that we were not in it for any colonizing purposes or imperialistic purposes. We were actually genuinely helping a neighbor in trouble. But later we seem to have, and you indicate that, later we seem to have lost that edge in Bangladesh. Whatever happened? Why did RAW lose its contact with Bangladesh, people who were in power in Bangladesh?
RAW was very close to Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and Awami League. And in 1975, when RAW actually discovered a plot, there was a plot which Bangladeshi army was doing to hatching to kill him. Actually, Mr. Kao himself went as a salesman and met him and told him that this plan is going to be the murder plan is there, and he refused to believe them, and he refused to actually help the situation basically. And finally, the murders happened. The entire family, how the family
was massacred. Yeah.
Massacred. And with that thing, a new set of regime came along, which is not RAW and India was not very close to that region, and that is how the first break happened. And post that, like making the connection, which you will actually nurture that connection for a really long time,
Right.
and suddenly it broke. So that post that India struggled a bit to make that connection or have that kind of warmth, which India generated during the war.
This is what we. I mean, of course, I'm
of
sure
course,
there are a lot more
multiple
like
reasons.
multiple like things at play, but I guess that there was a purpose for which like India and Bangladesh had come together, and Bangladesh also was now a new nation. They were figuring out their own independence, and I guess it takes a while for a country to find its feet. So I think in all of this, and with different things happening, the emergency happened. Indira Gandhi was not in power anymore. Mr. Kao was not in power anymore. So a lot of these things could have contributed to that. This is what we suspect.
Right. In fact, one of the questions that somebody has put up is, I thought we may as well take it now since you mentioned the emergency. During the emergency, this is Guruptesh Singh. During the emergency, R.K. Dhawan had a lot of clout which he could exercise on R&Aw. Could you tell us something about that period and the role that RAW played?
This is the emergency we're talking about.
Yeah. This is a little outside the domain of the book, but
I'm honest. Sorry,
Yes,
we don't know much about.
Speak on that.
Yeah, we don't know much about it.
I think the IB played a bigger role than R&Aw. But talk a little about the difference and the sort of the continuing rivalry between IB and R&Aw, because Mr. Kao was very clear that Mrs. Gandhi was very clear that it should not be staffed by IPS officers. I think she had a genuine problem with them. And she wanted R&Aw to be staffed by a different kind of cadre. So they also recruited a lot of direct recruits, from professors and Talk a little about the kind of people who constituted RAW, not just the field agents, but also the analysts. The kind of work that we now see in The Family Man and Shrikant Tiwari and Task.
So now Raw's role was pretty different from IB. IB primarily dealt with the internal matters, internal intelligence, and which is not like hard information gathering. But Raw's role was primarily in hard information gathering, making sense of it, and presenting it to the authorities, the government. So that is why they needed different sorts of people who can play different roles, 4-5 different roles at the same time. There is a set of people who are the administrator of the RAW, who are running the RAW, who are the directors and separate government authorities on the RAW. But there are certain other people who their primary job is to process the information, make sense of the information, and there are several agents working in different countries, and how to gather those information, make sense of it, and make it a credible intel to use in peacetime, also in wartime. And any information gathered by any agent is processed by these guys, information officers, and these information can help not only in war, maybe in business treaty, in some water dispute, some land dispute. It can help.
So I think what Mr. Kao wanted to stay away from was like kind of a bureaucracy that came with the IB. He needed the power to take quick decisions, and because of all of these international exposures that he had, I think he also wanted to be a more stylish agency than what the IB was. He had access to CIA. In fact, they came and helped do some initial training. He had from the Mossad. So it was all of this exposure and his close friendships with them that kind of made our own Desi version of like a good spy agency. So I think that was the primary thing, that we will not be IB. We will be, we'll be quicker on our feet. We will take our own decisions, and we will be more stylish and not repeat the mistakes that they did.
Right. I think that was quite clear. And I think they had a lot of direct recruits as well from colleges and universities, and very bright people working for them. that really tells you. But at some point, of course, again, RNAW, I think, lost its way. What is the
Yeah.
the kind of agency that it is now? When you talk to people, when they remember the old days, do you get a sense that it's a legacy that they're proud of, but they haven't quite lived up to, or do you get some other kind of sense?
No, I don't think I think they're still proud of it. Like they feel like definitely, but they feel that it is a legacy that they have to continuously live up to. But because I feel like, we had bigger events in history that we can talk about. Probably 30 years from now, maybe 50 years from now, we could talk about what RNAW is doing right now. But I guess because they cannot talk openly about what they're doing right now, we're relying on the stories or the glorious history that we have, that the stories that we can talk about. But we don't get the sense that they are particularly unhappy or anything. It's just that Mr. Kao is such a legendary figure that they all look up to him, and they all he is the quintessential spy master of India.
One of the other things that is quite remarkable is that that nuclear device may still be floating somewhere down the Ganga. Talk about the expedition that goes up to Nanda Devi, and then they lose the device and God knows where it is.
Yeah.
So what happened in 1964? China conducted their first nuclear test.
Yeah.
And it being India's next door neighbor and of course enemy of India, India wanted to do something about it. But although India and America, they were not very close friends that time, America was also very wary of Chinese nuclear bomb. So they together, CIA, Indian agency at that time, IB, came together to plant one device which would detect any kind of radiation and seismic activity in Kashmir, in China if they exploded. So expedition went in
this is called Operation Hat.
Operation Hat. Yeah. Joint operation of CIA and IB went to
operation. You lose count after some time. There's Operation Narkana, there's Operation Searchlight. There's so many of them. Anyway, so carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. So then a joint operation was actually mounted to plant a device on top of Nanda Devi. But during the course of their journey, one blizzard came along and they lost their way.
Yeah.
And they had to dump the device and come back down.
So they had to choose between the device and the men, and they chose the men.
Yeah.
And so that device has not been found till date. So it's definitely
I wonder
floating around, picking up some. We don't know what all it's picked up, the signals that it's picked up.
I mean, the idea that it's still floating around somewhere down the Ganga, and one day will be washed up on the Varanasi Ghats or something.
It's a plutonium power device.
Yeah. Just imagine.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the first black box.
Are there stories like that surprised you when you were researching it and you thought, my God, what is this?
Yeah. Honestly, apart from knowing that we won the war, we started off from there. So everything was oh my God, yeah. So every big, actually, I think our favorite operations are, one is Operation Jackpot, which is the operation where we blew up ships at the Chittagong port and 4 other ports around, and we stopped the access of West Pakistan's waterway access to East Pakistan, because that was a fascinating story. So for all the viewers, when you read the book, you'll see that it starts off in France, where there are 9 people who,
East Pakistani origin.
Yeah, of East Pakistani origin, who run away, who abandon the ship that they're on to come and fight for East Pakistan. So there's a chase.
They're deserters.
They're deserters. So there's a chase that goes across 4 countries. They come to India. There's training. There's a secret mission. There's Sundarbans. So it's the quintessential a drama, and which has got everything, and it's a victory in the end. That one, and Tangel airdrop is again something that we were very excited about when we read it.
Or also one other thing which I really find very
fascinating.
Talk about
the airdrop so that people know what it is.
Yeah, we'll just switch on the
I'll
lights
just switch
so
on
that
the
we
lights,
get some
absolutely.
brightness. So the Tangail airdrop, this was almost towards the end of the war. Everything we were winning, or like we were winning for East Pakistan, but the only thing that was left was Dhaka. So now we needed people to reach Dhaka, and it was taking a lot of time because bridges were blown up, and the army was still not. They knew they were losing, but they had orders to continue and continue. They were tired and losing, but they were not letting go of Dhaka. So
also in the background, India had Pakistan had proposed a ceasefire in United Nations, and USSR being India's friend, they had vetoed that resolution once, and they had said if we have vetoed it once, we would not do it again.
Yeah.
So that is why, and they told India, if you do not win the war in next 3-4 days, this resolution will be tabled again. We will not vote against it. So India had to do something about it.
And if that resolution was passed, it would be ceasefire. So we would East Pakistan would still not have won the war. Exactly. It would have been a struggle.
Independent, it would have had to really work on it yet again.
Yeah, then it would have become a long
negotiation and
international politics it would have become. So that is why Tangail airdrop was mounted, and big psychological warfare mounted with that. How 500 people who landed here, the numbers bloated.
So Tangail is a small place next to Dhaka. So they figured that this is the best place to airdrop people, so that from there they can march to Dhaka. So but how do you just airdrop a battalion or make it look like a battalion? So this was a whole a very cool plan that was hatched to airdrop people, get them to Dhaka, and at the same time kind of do a little bit of false news into the media that
and this
we've
is how
already
you
won
play
the
up
war.
Play up the false information, and how you instill fear into
know all about now. News, all about
how Chinese whispers were started at that point.
Fascinating. The other thing that, of course, amazed me was that final assault on the government house. And the initial information comes that it's the circuit house, then they're told it's a government house. And my God, that again is, it really is something that's so thrilling, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is. And also India did not have an option, because on 13th or 14th, Pakistan proposed a resolution for ceasefire, and India could not. If the ceasefire is implemented and it goes on, then again the status quo remains. India or Bangladesh have still not won the war, so they had to change that ceasefire into a surrender, into a victory, total victory. That is how this plan was hatched. How East Pakistan, skeletal East Pakistan, government people wanted to meet and sign a ceasefire agreement, and they did not want that to happen. India did not want that.
So India intercepted that, and Wing Commander Bishnoi was given almost a hand-drawn map, saying that go bomb somewhere here. So he had to figure out the government house. So first it was told that go bomb the circuit house, and they said no, go bomb the government house. So he had to find the government house, and he had 7 minutes to do it. So it was quite.
Is he still around? Is he still alive?
He is.
So did you get to talk to him?
No, we didn't, but he's written a book, and he's written it quite in detail. So with that and the information of how they intercepted the information and stuff is what we pieced.
And I love the bit about Niazi under the table writing his ceasefire.
So it was not Niazi, it was the governor at that
time.
Writing it.
We could almost imagine him coming out with hands up, I give up, I sign.
I mean, whatever you say, there's nothing however multicultural and however sort of generous we get, beating Pakistan in cricket and war are the two greatest joys India has, I think, nothing like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but I think this
even
war
if
was
the most peace-loving Indian, there's something about us, I think,
Oh yeah, I think we've been fed this story so much. But I think even if it was not Pakistan, if this war at least this 1971 war is so fascinating that it is a thriller. It's like, I think people have been just researching it irrespective of which nation it was like,
because
it's a
it
joy.
was almost like winning the war against America as well. I mean, you had Nixon and Kissinger sitting there and, being aiding Pakistan all along. And I think the blood telegram, of course, does a lot to expose that. Which is one other point I want to make, that even now, technically, what happened in Bangladesh is not considered a genocide, which is really an offense to history. Because if that is not a genocide, what is? Talk about that. It really is so wrong that what happened there is not considered a genocide.
So this started with the beginning of. So I think
So. Elections were held in Pakistan in end of 1970s, and East Pakistan, West Pakistan thought thought they are superior than East Pakistan. There were the resources and the right on resources were really not equally divided. Even though population-wise, East Pakistan was really, and they always thought when the election happened, they will win the bigger victory, and which was apna Bhutto, and then when the election happened.
And the election happened because the East Pakistanis were very unhappy for not being recognized for their language and their cultural identity. So that's the Bhasha Andolan, it's called. Like, that was the start of this whole struggle and the need for an independent country.
Yeah, and when the elections were held, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman went a landslide victory, and he was poised to become the Prime Minister of Pakistan. But of course, West Pakistan could not allow that. So Bhutto engaged Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in a negotiation, while in the background a conspiracy was being hatched. Where after 2 months negotiation, they realized, West Pakistan's ruler Yahya Khan realized that they are not going to get East Pakistan so easily, and the only option was left to military intervention. And also they realized by the time people in the East Pakistan, they're so galvanized by their independent struggle that they would not so easily give in. And then a plan was hatched to militarily take over the country and kill people.
As basically, I won the land and not the people.
Yeah, he won. It was just that we won the land, and the key to the land is Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So let's go for him. But they did it in such a brutal manner. It's called Operation Searchlight, and it is the biggest genocide in history. There's no doubt about it. Where they just descended, and millions and millions of Bangladeshis were butchered.
And Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was in Dhaka in his hotel room. From his hotel window, actually he saw tanks firing.
Yeah, he saw Dhaka burning, and all of those refugees started pouring into India. And then India had a refugee crisis, but it was...
which is the other thing. When the world talks about the refugee crisis, it forgets that India was one of the most generous in receiving refugees and in fighting for their rights. We have had a greater experience and perhaps greater compassion for refugees than the rest of the world, with limited resources. Very limited
resources.
Imagine India had just some 23 years back, it had gotten independence. India was still a poor country, struggling with resources and all, and they had to suddenly host some 4-5 million people, refugees coming along without any resources. You have to feed them, protect them, and fight their war.
Right. Great. I also want to take in some questions that have come in. This is more of a comment, but I'll just read it out to you. It's from Azam Gill. I was in Court Lakhpat Jail, Lahore, where I was in frequent and friendly contact with Hashim Qureshi, imprisoned by Pakistan. He was not 16 when he got into this business. And despite India's denials and the findings of the authors now, yes, he did appear to be a duped Indian agent, since he had a very high opinion of himself with the other prisoners. I had to put him in his place. And the duping was so well done that Hashim had the support of the Kashmiri separatists in Pakistan. Their support ensured that he didn't have a rough time in prison. Probably the Kashmiri separatists jumped on the bandwagon to share credit. The jumping probably was a cowboy orchestrated whisper. Yeah. I think this is the point you make,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. But that's quite fascinating.
It is. It is. Do you want to add something to that?
No, I mean, just that then we kind of deduced well from our
Yeah,
research.
very well. Then there's a question again from Simar Onkar. The government recently came up with an order banning anyone from writing about anything to do with intelligence or intelligence organizations without taking permission in writing from a handful of government departments. Did you guys manage to write and publish just in time, or did you have to take permission from these government departments? If the latter, how did you guys go about and manage it? Or is it all the information that you used as your sources, are they declassified and in the public domain?
So I think
Very
the
good
government order has
Yeah.
the government order has come very recently. I think.
Yeah,
it's
I
about
think
a
first
week,
of all
10
we
days
wrote
before.
and got published just in time.
Just in
That's
time.
that's one. Yeah.
Yeah. And the order came very recently, and
Right.
we did not have to actually.
So-
And we have.
Sorry.
We are saying a lot of information that we have used, is it in public domain, and we have used some interviews also, some books also we have
Right.
referenced. So most of this information is there. We have
So
just
also, I think I'm not sure if this order means that you can't write your own book or you can't even give an interview. I think that's a little ambiguous. But yeah, as in, so there are some reports that Mr. Kao has written, and he had said that on his death, like it should be out in public domain in 2025. So that's when he wanted them to be out. So
Is
we
that
didn't.
so?
Yeah,
that's real.
yeah, it's a
fact.
fact. It's a fact.
It's called
So,
Cow Paper.
the Cow Papers. So they are going to be out in the public domain in 2025.
Wow,
So I
can't
guess
wait
that,
to read them.
They will.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think anybody wants them to come out. So like in West is very transparent that after 25 years they actually release all those.
Yeah, and you should. Why not? It's part of history. We should know about it.
I mean, our parents called after reading the book and said, "Are you sure it's okay to write about this?" We're like, "It's 50 years since the war, you know. Most of the people are not alive." And my mom is like, "What if some Pakistanis read this book?" So I'm like, "No, mom, that's not how it
But
works."
they need to know their history as well.
Yeah.
Okay, then this is from A.S. Sandhu. Raw was indeed a success story in the Eastern theatre. In part, it was also because they had the help of the Mukti Bahini and the Bengali population that side. However, in the Western theatre, it was a different story. A case in point that they were unable to get any intelligence of the biggest land offensive of Pakistan in the Cham sector. The move of some strategic forces and the huge Pakistani build-up opposite Chum went completely unnoticed by Raw. This was a gross intelligence failure.
This was actually Western Pakistan was handled by raw and plus military intelligence, both of them. And of course, intelligence is not a foolproof job all the time. There are gaps in information. So it was a Chum sector was a very big failure.
I also think like how the failures of 62 and 65 led to a lot of introspection. I guess like every time there is a failure, it calls for an introspection, and it probably calls for new methods of spycraft, figuring new means. Of course, we're not experts on this, but I guess like we don't know at that point what was kind of who was in power, who is reporting to whom. But during the 71 war, there was clear indication that Mrs. Indira Gandhi she's given like Mr. Kao can do anything that he needs, and even the military at that point could do anything that they needed to win the war. So It was like that kind of a carte blanche, which we don't know what happened.
And it was a direct contact. There were no intermediaries. There was direct access. Azim Gill replies to that, and he says the Chum failure was balanced by Pakistan's reciprocal intelligence failure in the Chum sector. Kismet. Okay, interesting. There's Sangamitra Malik, who says for Bengalis, our language is supreme. That is true. There was no similarity between the people of East and West Pakistan, so they could not have been together possibly. Cultures are totally different. My father's family is originally from Tangail in Bangladesh. I suppose that's why Yeah.
say, part of the history.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, then
Actually,
Sandhya, sorry, tell me.
please.
Then there's a question from Sandhya Ramachandran. Firstly, congratulations on writing what I consider an extremely rare achievement of an edge of the seat thriller about a historical episode. My question, if you had to give it a ratio, how much of the book is fact and how much fiction?
Thank you, Sandhya. So we would say that 90% of the book is fact. It's just the little conversations that we've peppered, like to keep the interest going and not just write it as a paragraph, is what is fiction in the book. This and that too, I think, like, they would have pretty much had that conversation. We've not really spoken about anybody's personal lives or something. It's just about, like, how do we do this strategy? How do we plan this? That kind of conversation.
I agree. Guru Desh Singh has another question. I guess the government orders are for those who've been in important government jobs. They're not supposed to spill the beans without explicit government permission. They're talking about what the question that have been asked before. Okay, so
Right.
my absolutely last couple of questions to you is cinematic, since both of you are also filmmakers. Who would you
Right.
cast as Mr. Kao if you had to cast in a web series?
In terms of, like, the way he looked, I think Saif Ali Khan would come. Like,
Wow. A very
if
marvelous.
Saif Ali Khan, you are listening to this interview,
Please star in this web series.
firstly, please read the book and then please star in this.
And if I can go little light on this, Mr. Kao was a very cool cat with black glasses, with jacket and everything. He's very cool looking.
Yeah. So, Saif, please, wherever you are, please.
Yeah, and our personal favorite who we want to work with is Mr. Anil Kapoor. So we put that into the universe as well.
Okay. What about Nair? Who would play Nair? A more sort of a more excitable sort of character.
I think it should definitely be like an actor from the South. So he's not that age, but another favorite of ours is Mr. Shobin Shahir, who's like a fantastic actor. And these are all just personal.
Put out all the names that you like.
Yeah.
So Mr. Shobin Shahir, if you're listening to this, please.
And I think my favorite, Mrs. Shamim. I really want to know who the Black Pearl would be. Very exotic. And Yahya Khan, yeah, what a character he was, no? So who would be Yahya and who would be Shamim, Mrs. Shamim?
I think Yahya Khan, any actor would be up for playing that part.
Yeah.
It's such a delicious character.
Delicious, debauched, and colorful character.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, like maybe a senior actor, Jackie Shroff.
Perfect. and Mrs. Shamim?
The one and only Tabu. Nobody is
Nobody
more
is
Tabu.
that.
So listen, I think you've done the screenplay, we've done the casting. So now I think we just have to quickly go and make the series.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, that is the only thing left to do.
Yeah, we would love for someone to make this interesting.
No, you guys should go ahead and do it. Thank you so much. I think it's been quite a delicious end to conversation. I thoroughly recommend this book to everyone. It is really a terrific read, and there's so much about our history that we don't know. And this is just 50 years ago. Think of what happened even before that. So this is really quite a remarkable work by two very young people. Thank you very much.
Thank
you
you
so much. Thank you.
Thank you,
Anusha. Thank you, Sandeep. And thank you, Kaveri, for being here and having this great conversation and ending on this fantastic note. We do have a film on our hands instead of a book now.
No, it's a web series. It's not a film. These days we don't watch films. We only watch web series.
Yeah, and we have part 2 and part 3 ready. So if there are any producers listening, it doesn't end at part 1.
Yeah,
Actually, do you have more?
We are
we
researching
do.
on it.
We do. We actually know if we had to do a second book where it would start and end. and we also know where the third book would start and end. If we
Again about Raw or about Bangladesh?
Yeah, the continuation of this, Mr. Kao's story, like
wow.
till his retirement. So we've kind of divided that into different chapters.
So Saif Ali Khan is going to be very busy. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to now request Jasmeet to please come and do the formal thank yous.
Yeah.
I am Jasmeet, and it's a gripping sort of conversation that we guys were listening to, and itna kuch naya mila hame sunne ko. Very, very good. And I found Arusha and Sandeep, for both of you, I loved your expressions and the way Preeti was introducing you. The chemistry and the bonding is so beautiful. Real happiness at having created what you did. And the aspect of war, which was totally new to us, at least to me, was the raw. And the insight, I loved the insight which you gave on the IB and the raw tug of war when it was being created in 1968, as you said. And thank you, Deepthi came for a very short while, and Kaveri for towing the conversation so grippingly. You know, when we were in Amritsar, we would get to know our friends in Raw. And very interesting thing that they would, the wife would tell us, he is so secretive. And even the things of the family which he's supposed to tell me, wo bhi secret ho jati hain. It's your attitude. You know? And and my husband was incidentally at the front in the Bangladesh war as a doctor, sewing up wounded airplane loads. So what he tells us are the war stories, but what you told us was the inside
stories. Yes.
That was totally a new insight for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Marja team, and thank you all the friends who have joined with us. Continue to be with us. We have a very gripping month full of July. I'll hand over to Arvinderji to tell you more about it. It was
Thank you so very much, Jasmeetji, and thank you, Anusha and Sandeep and Kaveri. Though you joined a little late, but then it was a beautiful conversation which you took over. And friends, we'll be joining tomorrow again at 5:50 p.m. for the Dark Tales. It'll be Vinita, who will be in conversation with Preeti and Nazi. So please join us tomorrow. That is 3rd of July, Saturday. We'll start at sharp 6, but please join at 5:50. Thank you so very much. And thank you once again from Maja House, from all of us.
Thank you.
God bless. Good night. Waiting for your second and third book. God bless.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.